What's up, y'all? If you're watching my channel, chances are you know who Dr. Mike Israetel is. You're maybe even a fan of him. But if you don't know him, he is an exercise scientist with his PhD in sports physiology. So that does lend him some legit credentials, but does nothing to change the fact that, in my opinion, Dr. Mike Israetel is unequivocally the single most overrated individual in the entire sports and fitness industry today, and maybe ever. Now, most of what he talks about, I don't disagree with. I think he gets way too much credit for certain concepts that have been around forever, and I think he actually takes them too far and it affects his training in a negative way. But I don't know why Mike gets so much credit for promoting higher volume and not training to failure. I mean, this is something that's been around since I first started. We did this in HST7. I mean, Lee Haney talked about stimulate, don't annihilate. Jay Cutler was a super high volume, never go to failure. This isn't groundbreaking or brand new. My main issue is that, well, Dr. Mike, he works out like a fucking asshole. You know, if you know anything about biomechanics, you can just look at him and you're just gonna be like, what the hell is going on? There's no tension on the muscles. He's using orientation strategies to hit this big range of motion that he desires, but he's not keeping tension on the muscles. And he's working out in a way that causes his body to lose range of motion, lose functionality. And also, I mean, he's gonna look like a powerlifter the way he works out. He's not gonna look like a bodybuilder. He's not gonna have the separation, the details of a bodybuilder. My main two issues with his mechanics are, first of all, he's stuck in extension all the time. He stabilizes through spine extension. He turns every single movement into a little bit of an erector exercise with some spine extension. And then my other big issue is that he uses these orientation strategies to hit ranges of motion that he feels like he has to hit, that he really doesn't have real range of motion to hit. And he's actually losing time under tension on the muscle. It's like, just getting a big range of motion doesn't equal muscle. We need mechanical tension, and that's what you're sacrificing for that. And also, a lot of times he doesn't get the in-range contraction, and he's orienting to try to get through there instead of keeping it on the muscle tissue. So I'll show you guys a few examples of what I'm talking about. Take a look at Dr. Mike. What a physique. This is what you can look like if you follow his strategies. And I'm not being a dick, and then him and some other people, you might think that this is genetics, but this isn't. When you see this pooch belly, you see this really flared rib cage, you can tell that this is somebody who has really overactive abdominals, really tight spinal paraspinals, really tight back muscles, erectors, really underactive pelvic floor. And so that's why all the times you see Dr. Mike, it looks like he's got this belly hanging out in front of him, even when he's at a lower body fat. It's not because he's super fat or even that he has insane amounts of visceral fat, but it's because his viscera is getting pushed forward because of where the pressure is coming from his overactive muscles, because of how he works out, how he's positioned himself, how his body feels like it has to be in order to operate. And so, I mean, this is somebody who does copious amounts of gear. You can even tell we got the little growth hormone horns on there. And this is not a physique that I really think I would be proud of if I had his level of education, his level of dedication. I mean, look, no pec development, and this is pretty common from people who use orientation strategies to work out their pecs. They're gonna miss out details. Sometimes you can get some decent size, but you're gonna miss the details. This is my bro science that I think Dr. Mike would hate, but whenever you don't get full contractions, you're gonna miss out on details. Yeah, we want in-range stretching, that can help with size, but if we don't squeeze the shit out of it, you're gonna miss out on some of those fine details that really matter in bodybuilding. All right, so let's check out some workout technique, and right away, I bet Dr. Mike is a super thrilled with this form. He thinks this is on point, but what I see is crazy neck extension right away, back extension lumbar, not really having the range of motion in your hips to get that depth. I don't see any counter nutation. I see your body just kind of rounding and shifting forward a little bit. And I mean, he's trained in a way that he's really taught his lower back. It's got to handle a fuck ton of load. Most of the people aren't able to get in that position without amount of load, without having some sort of issues or pain. And I mean, and you can also see, like, he can't even reach the bar. He has no external rotation in his shoulders. And I mean, your mobility is really a direct result of the activities that you're doing. So when you work out like an asshole using shitty orientation strategies, you destroy your range of motion in your shoulders and in your hips. And you can see that super evident here. I mean, he's not even like close to the bar. He's very far in front of it. And I mean, look at that just extreme flare. Just fuck a stack. You know, who needs a stack? I guarantee if I were to actually like take Mike on a table and do some table tests, he would have a horrible straight leg raise, horrible internal rotation, nothing there, terrible external rotation. I mean, he would present with just such limitations that I honestly wouldn't even probably let him do much loading bilaterally for like a month or two. Everything would be unilateral. We'll be working on getting some relative motion back. So here we see a chest supported T-bar row where he is not using the chest support at all. He's using it to turn this into a back extension exercise. And if I saw somebody doing this at my gym, I would probably go over and try to offer advice and help them, because this is not what you want to do on a T-bar row. I mean, why are you making this a back extension movement? I mean, the whole point is to use the chest support. You know, you have unsupported, barbell rows, unsupported cable rows. The chest support is supposed to allow you to kind of keep that contact and keep the ribs from flaring, so you can get a little bit different back activation. And every single time you're just extending as you're pulling, you're missing out on shoulder extension, you're missing out on a lot of the lats, because you're not keeping these ribs controlled at all. I mean, not every single movement has to be a low back movement. I mean, I think most people who just started working out would look at this and be like, what the fuck? We're gonna look at some pull-ups now. I think that's what we're looking at. Let's see what kind of great advice we have from Dr. Mike.
Critical things to look for in an assisted pull-up machine are: one, good range of motion, especially bottom stretch.
Really important to look for a good range of motion, especially the bottom stretch in an assisted pull-up machine. What the fuck does that mean? Every single time you're at the bottom of a assisted pull-up machine, you're in the same stretch position. What, are you fucking bottoming it out with your little fucking legs and body? I don't think so. So, I mean, this is another example of him just talking to talk. I don't know why people think he has anything to fucking say, to be honest. So we watch him do the pull-ups.
To be something like
just tons of extension right away. Again, no lats involved whatsoever. Again, something, if I saw in isolation in itself just one time, I wouldn't think anything of it. But now I see a pattern where every single thing this guy does is through huge global extension. Oh, like this. Like stabilizing your tricep push down through neck extension, through back extension. Like every single thing is getting that over involved. So let's look at this chest press. We have an incline press. What I see is immediate rib flare. Again, ribs are gonna move as we press, as we drop, but we want them to move under tension. We gotta think about, where do our pecs actually attach? He's so like stressed and so hyper focused on getting the stretch from this position. He always recommends going real wide and real low. Well, that might get a little bigger stretch in the clavicular fibers, but when we have that huge flare and we're opened up and we're squeezing our shoulders back, we're not thinking about the sternal fibers where they attach to the coastal cartilage. So it's like, if my ribs are in a more depressed position as I lower the weight, I'm gonna get more of a stretch than if I'm opened up right here. That is not tension. You wanna keep those ribs down, actually keep tension. You also don't wanna completely retract your shoulder blades. You want to get like more depression and posterior tipping on there. And so there's no real contraction at the end range on this. As far as the actual pecs working, I see a little bit of upper abs working. Arching your back is okay. Not really. On a chest press, when you want your chest, don't arch your back. You'll feel way more pecs if you're just a little bit, tiny bit past neutral and extension. Oh my gosh. And here what do we got here? We have some flies. Again, I just see crazy orientation strategies through these ribs. That's not helping you. Keep these down. If you control that stack, you'll feel way more tension on your muscles. We have some cable flies now. We get in a decent stretch. I don't have anything really wrong with that, but whenever we close, it's not terrible. Again, we're kind of orienting to get there. I don't see a real good contraction on there. I don't see that full press. I don't see any kind of full kind of depression of the ribs at the end. And same thing over here. We're still in that flared position. Now we're up high. When you over squeeze your shoulder blades, you take a lot of tension off your pecs. You don't want to completely retract your shoulders when you press. Again, this is a powerlifting strategy. We don't want to look like powerlifters. And what do we have here? We have more of this just beautiful stabilizing from the erectors and this tricep. So what a great back extension exercise. You might get a little bit of triceps with this too.
Last exercise. The two really good cues to use are arch your back a little bit, push your chest up, and also retract your shoulder.
Don't arch your back and push your chest up, and don't retract your shoulder blades. Don't be like Dr. Mike.
Pre-stretches your pecs and keep your shoulders tight and tucked.
Pre-stretches your pecs. That's fucking stupid. You don't want to pre-stretch your pecs. You want to load them into that lengthened stretch position.
It's the chest, the real bonus of the move.
All right, we got leg curls. Again, you can see the pooch belly. You can see the crazy extension strategies. You can see the feet turned out because his hips are so dumped forward. He has to have this external rotation strategy to hit the ranges of motion that he places his body in. You can see right here, super turned out duck feet. And again, this is a leg curl that he's turning into a back extension. And when you add extension on every movement, you miss in-range contraction on something like this. We're taking away from the upper hamstring development because we're using these fucking beastly erectors. I mean, he's got some erectors on him because he has to. Again, this is a squat. We're using big orientation strategies. There's no sort of relative motion happening in the hips. Not a huge deal in isolation, but again, it's how you do one thing is how he does everything. When we're looking at these lunges, you can really see some of his lack of mobility. I mean, he looks like a big toddler walking. But you see that collapsed arch on the left foot? That's because we're missing internal rotation there. You can see the missing internal rotation, so we're missing pronation of the foot. It all starts at the hips. And again, it's because of the way he works out. It's not a genetics thing. It's because he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know how to do proper mobility work for that. So here's an example of how Dr. Mike really likes to use orientation strategies to get to end range contractions. So instead of doing a lat pullover, getting your lats, kind of keeping control, keeping your ribs from going crazy, he's just using every single muscle group he can to try to get to that end range. So when I see someone doing this, and I mean, oh, he does look pretty cute with his little feet dangling. When I see someone do this, I don't know what they're feeling, what they're getting. I see some pecs going, I see some abs, I see very little lats going on. I mean, this is just horrible technique. You can see anyone doing this in the gym, and you would just be like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing at all. And it's funny because someone like him gets so much respect for their titles as having a PhD in exercise science, but then you have somebody like Branch Warren who gets completely shit on for having poor technique, when in reality, I think he's got way better technique than Mike. I mean, look at this. Yeah, he's using some momentum, but he's not using orientation strategies. He's keeping his spine neutral. He's putting tension on the actual muscle. I would take that over the way Mike lifts any fucking day. Okay, again, we have a pull with no lats. Back extension, crazy rib flare. Okay, we get it. That is your go-to move. Rib flare, back extension on every single move. Okay, what about here? Okay. All right, immediate back extension and rib flare. I don't see any shoulder extension. When I see someone use this technique, I can tell they're not gonna have really good rear delts. They're not gonna have very developed lats either. And again, just so much on that low back. Here we have them on the Smith machine doing more chest work. And again, there's just no tension on the muscle. Immediate rib flare, over retract it, pressing. We're actually getting a little rib depression, but it looks like it's come from the abs this time. I guarantee you he's not feeling much on his actual pecs. So let's get Dr. Mike's opinion on posture.
Posture is the single biggest cesspool of bullshit ever. Posture is mostly genetic.
There's a small genetic component. I mean, your infrasternal angle, your infrapubic angle, but posture is really dictated by the forces that you put your body under. And there's no perfect posture. It's not like there's a certain way to be or move that's perfect, but you can definitely move like an asshole like Dr. Mike does. And doing so will fuck up your posture, which basically means you no longer have good range of motion of your joints and you're gonna have issues.
Almost nothing to do with muscle strength. It's just how you usually sit. Nobody has bad posture because their pecs are too strong and their back is too weak. You'll notice something about your muscles. They're not just on all the fucking time.
Well, you do have concentric activation through your entire erector group, Mike. They are on all the time on you. Some muscles are concentrically activated to some degree, and that does create issues.
If your pecs are really big and strong, my pecs are rather big and strong, if I say so myself.
Not very detailed.
No, not diddly dick. I'm not sitting with my pecs activated. Where the do these people come from?
Oh, and this is a great example of what can happen when you lift using orientation strategies and overextending everything. You can end up hurting your neck while you sleep. I mean, so when I just started looking at Dr. Mike's clips, like I didn't know who he was at all. I've always turned off anything that he came on right away just because I'm just so like turned off by him. I don't know why. But I typed in Dr. Mike injury. After seeing the way he worked out, I knew this guy had to have some kind of injuries in his history. And just based off of what I know, seeing someone with his setup, his strategies, I can tell he's going to mitigate some of the issues that would come from having like the achy knees, shoulders, elbows, and that kind of thing by just like changing the volume and kind of backing off. Again, someone like him really recommends not going to failure. That's because his body can't handle going to failure. It's in a fucked up position because of the way he works out. And also, every single rep this guy does looks like he's at failure. His first rep looks like what someone should look like at an absolute failure. So I don't know where he's gonna go if he hits failure. He's gonna have to just move through spaces. He's already oriented his whole everything. But anyway, I was curious to see if he had any kind of injuries in his neck or back, because that's typically what I see with this kind of pattern. This what we call in PRI, we call it a pec pattern. And you get a lot of minor aches and pains in your neck and back, occasionally a pretty bad spasm. So here we have Dr. Mike, tending to his wounded neck that happened from sleeping. But I guarantee it happened is he probably had some sort of a injury during the workout, felt it, and then he woke up the next day and it was like way worse. And then when you look at these comments, you can see like this guy's saying, I'm assuming this was from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and not lifting, which these people respect him so much they can't comprehend that when you work out like an asshole, things like these happen. And Mike works like an asshole even though he's a doctor. And here he goes, he talks about, I just slept on it wrong. About 95% of my shit is like that. Okay, do you know why that is? That's because when you're in a gym in a controlled environment and you're loading your body, you can kind of tell like, okay, I feel a little funky, this is it, I'm gonna back off a little bit. It's when you're in an uncontrolled environment, when you're not thinking about it, when you're in certain positions for too long, or you do a sudden movement or something, that's when it's gonna happen. It's gonna be all funky outside the gym, but it's because of what you're doing in the gym. This is kind of funny because you don't see a lot of people that will actually talk shit on Dr. Mike on his Instagram, and especially without getting a lot of crap from some of his followers. But black belt Trevor, so probably a jiu-jitsu guy. You train like a moron in all your videos, no wonder you get hurt. So it's like, it's true, like Dr. Mike, how do you even do jiu-jitsu with your mobility, with your shitty like tight pec pattern? You have no rotation ability, you've got no joint range of motion. And that's what I did have to double check on this, because I thought he might have got hurt in actual jiu-jitsu, and he clarified that he didn't. Being stuck in extension the way Dr. Mike is all the time is really negative for a lot of reasons. I mean, one, it is really unaesthetic and contributes to that belly pooch that you see on him, but it also creates these flared ribs and this done forward pelvis, which just kills your shoulder and hip mobility. It just takes away all your internal and external rotation. But it also can create a sympathetic response, because that's where your sympathetic nervous system lies, and it can be compressed through there. So when you're in this state of inhalation because your ribs won't go down and you're compressing the sympathetic nerve, you can be in a real fight or flight mode, and it can really affect a lot of things in your life. And so let's see Dr. Mike at his last show. And again, this is somebody who has all the access to the best drugs, the best trainers, the best gyms, and this is what we come up with. And his physique is exactly what I would expect. It looks kind of like a powerlifter trying to be a bodybuilder. Again, you can see the belly pooch, which is from his descended pelvis, his overactive erectors, his overactive abs, creates that unaesthetic appeal, that unaesthetic appearance. Dr. Mike actually has decent pecs genetically, I think, but you can see zero separation through anything, no fibers, shoulders are terrible, no delts, no lats. I mean, somebody like him, what they're gonna have is they're gonna have erectors, and that's usually about it. I mean, no details at all. Terrible lats, but these erectors, man, they are some meaty erectors. You gotta give them that. I mean, when every single exercise you do is an erector exercise, you're gonna have them developed. So what is this? Oh, most important muscle to look jacked.
If you get a wide back with big ass lats, what it does is it exaggerates that V taper even more, and then you wear.
If you get a wide back with big ass lats, is this like wishful thinking? What is this?
Wear suits, you wear fitted shirts, you look fucking ridiculous.
Oh, maybe he's talking about Nasser and Ronnie, because he's not talking about himself with wide lats.
Ridiculous. Like, you get a guy turn around and you see his lats through his fucking dress shirt at a wedding, you're like, do I want to marry that guy? I mean, not married, but certainly I could go to the bathroom and please him orally. It's the least I could do. I mean, what are weddings for anyway? So big back is a big deal, and with her...
But you don't have it at all. Like, no lats at all.
With or without clothes, it establishes that fucking presence. Big back plus big shoulders is like...
So the two things you lack the absolute most as a bodybuilder.
Super Mario, with the shit grows at bonus points. That is really a fucking look.
Is that what he's trying to get on his own? Is that what he thinks he has? Because that's not where you're at all, Dr. Mike. Some goon lighting. Again, we see this fucking disgusting, grotesque little belly popping out. Again, this is what you can get. You do the amount of drugs and you work out like Dr. Mike. So we can see here these crazy overdeveloped erectors. And he's like, whoa, what the fuck is that shit on my back? That is what you have created inadvertently. And I think he's actually really proud of these. But again, you can see no width in the lats at all. Yeah, I'll take lats over these thick ass erectors. People are telling me my spine erectors are weird and it's making me self-conscious. Yeah, they're weird. Most people don't lift every single pound of weight that they do through their back. Here's more Dr. Mike advice. I noticed that your feet aren't in a perfectly symmetrical setting. Dr. Mike, I honestly think overthinking that stuff borders on mental illness. So it's like, what? So your foot position, if you have one foot turned out real weird and the other's not, that's a sign of your mobility really being off, and that's going to lead to uneven development. I mean, you're a bodybuilder, Mike. You know that symmetry is very big, and if your foot placement is weird, you can end up with a situation where you might have an adductor that's way bigger, which is really common with a lot of bodybuilders. You look at somebody like Nick Walker, his asymmetrical legs are one of his biggest detractions from his physique. Here's another question. This is one that was answered by one of his disciples, and it's just kind of crazy to me that he spawns this kind of thinking, because it's not healthy. Just a question, isn't she hyperextending the back? And would it be better if she wasn't looking straight to the front, instead keeping her neck a little bit more neutral? So this person's saying, hey, wouldn't it be better if they did their workout with a little more neutral spine? Common sense. Look, you're not gonna fuck yourself up if you go in an extension, but ideally we wanna be in a neutral spine when we're doing most of our work. You're gonna get way more tension on the muscles. You're gonna stop yourself from getting injuries. You're gonna stop yourself from looking all fucked up. He has some disciple of his spouting some bullshit about why it's actually good to do all your movements with extension, hyperextension in your back, basically. I do like what this guy had to say. I don't think hyperextension per se is dangerous, but I see clinically a lot of patients with anterololesthesis type injuries in combo with rotational injuries, since the erectors take up so much slack for a lot of people. So what he's saying is people that are really stuck in their back, it increases their incidence of vertebrae slips. That is a type of spondylolisthesis, and it is associated with athletes that have a lot of force generated while they're going into a global extension. And also a lot of people have rotational issues that are overextended because, like I mentioned before, when you're extended, you don't have rotation. Rotation is an expression of spinal flexion. Okay, so this is a really good point. And I like that there are people that are actually on here that do call them out. Okay, so at this point you might be saying, but John, Dr. Mike has a PhD. You know, I just have a bachelor's in finance. I'm a PRI practitioner. So what right do I have to critique someone with a PhD in exercise science? Well, one thing you got to understand is that having a PhD really gets you very specific in what your area of focus is, okay? And as an undergrad, when you do exercise science, you get a little bit of kinesiology, but then whenever you go into your graduate work, you kind of decide, am I gonna go the kinesiology route, or I'm gonna go the exercise science route? And if you go the exercise science route like Dr. Mike did, you're really not getting much biomechanics, much kinesiology, not much at all past what you did as an undergraduate. You're really more studying the acute effects of exercise hormonally, the nutrition that goes into it, and how to manipulate variables to get the effects that you want. When you go on the kinesiology biomechanics side, that's when you really break down human movement and get a good understanding. So Dr. Mike is not a movement expert at all. If you couldn't tell just by looking at him, his education was not based on movement. Listen to his advice on nutrition, on anything that has to do with like training volume, training style that doesn't have to do with technique. When it comes to technique and biomechanics, he's fucking clueless, okay? And this is a good example of how you can't always trust people because of the credentials, because here he is going up against an argument with Dr. Joel Seidman, who also has his PhD, but his is in kinesiology. And they've had a few run-ins over the years where Dr. Mike really shits on Dr. Joel Seidman, which, you know, some of it's warranted, but a lot of it's not. And we'll go over just a little bit, so I'll share my thoughts.
Brain violence today, fellas. I've had enough charlatan nonsense. Ain't no more nuance left in this mouth. You, Joel Seidman. And if you see me in the street, you know what I'm saying? I'm joking.
Oh, this guy.
Hey, folks. I'm Dr. Mike Israetel, professor of sport and exercise science, co-founder of Renaissance Periodization, bodybuilder, grappler, etc. But mostly, I'm known for talking smack on the internet in video form, specifically about folks that have some modicum of fame and are exercising some combination of, well,
so condescending.
Well. Today, we are going to be setting our laser beam sights on Doctor of Exercise Science, I believe.
Kinesiology.
Joel Seidman. Let's do it. When we look at all areas of kinesiology, already I'm tripped.
Honestly, this isn't a horrible depth. What they fight about all the time is squat depth and 90-degree ranges of motion. which we'll get into later.
So just the background of who Joel Seedman is. Joel Seedman has, I think, a PhD in exercise science. He's
kinesiology.
Similarly qualified to myself.
Way more qualified than you when it comes to biomechanics. He got a PhD in kinesiology from the University of Georgia. You have a PhD in sports physiology from East Tennessee, and I think that's like the only school that offers that I could find. So he understands how the body works a lot better than you.
Except he...
Now, I know, and everybody knows, that Joel's a little bit full of shit, just a little bit. I mean, he even admits it, but he does say how the crazy shit that you see on Instagram is only like 2% of what he actually does.
Likes to create really fancy exercises that have a lot of complexity to them.
So Joel's whole thing is that he really promotes 90-degree angles. He doesn't think you should squat deeper than 90 degrees. He doesn't think you should bench press or row deeper than 90. And I mean, the reason he promotes this is because that it is a good like range of motion to ensure that you're keeping relative motion and not dipping into orientation strategies. And he trains a ton of athletes. And if these athletes trained under Mike the way he does, they would lose all athleticism right away. And honestly, even as a bodybuilder, I would probably rather train Joel's style of 90 degrees versus Mike's overreaching and using extension and orientation strategies to get there. And I mean, there is evidence that this might be optimal, and Joel talks about that there are conflicting studies, whereas you see someone like Mike who says this is it 1,000%, this is the only option. So I do think that's worth noting, is that Joel, you know, I think he overdoes it with the 90 degrees, but I do think that is a little closer to what is optimal, and that's going to be very varied individually. So maybe 90 degrees isn't the best for someone squatting. Maybe they're a little bit better at like 95 or 100. Someone might be rowing. I mean, I do think the rowing is a little silly. I think we should probably row past 90 in most cases, but on bench press and things like that, 90 might be optimal for a lot of people. And if they try to push past that, they're not only going to risk injuring themselves, they're not going to build muscle as well.
Zero lower body injuries. Interesting claim, by the way, almost certainly wrong. I've heard people.
So Joel's talking about how he has 0 injuries through training all of these pros.
People I trained before.
And Mike is talking about he's hurt people. Definitely believe that, Mike. What I think the multiple debates that Mike and Joel have had with each other really illustrates is that you can't just put an umbrella of trust around someone based off of their credentials, because these are two people who have real similar credentials and could not have more different views on how to work out.
Technique-wise, of all the technique differences we see between lifters, I think that is a very small explanatory factor for the total cause of injuries in lifting. So technique variance, I think, is a very small component of injury variance. I think the largest component is probably the total volume load you're exposing the lifter to, and also the ramping of volume load for it.
This is so stupid. So Dr. Mike's saying that the reason people get injured is because they do too much volume, not because of a variance in their technique, not because they're using shitty technique. It's not like you can use perfect form, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that rep was too much volume, now I'm fucked up. What happens is you get to a point where you compensate, where you use an orientation strategy and your body can't handle that. You're never gonna hurt yourself using perfect technique, okay? It's because you're having some sort of an extension, some sort of a lateral shift. Something is making you move funky. You've overdone it, but it's because of the technique. It's because the technique went. It's not because of the amount of volume, because you could have, you know, very low volume and just lose your technique right away because it's too much of a load, or you could have a very manageable load but just have so much volume that you no longer keep your form. But it always comes down to form and technique.
For example, is much more likely to injure somebody. Also, I think probably the biggest factor outside of volume load and do they train is genetics. I think genetics is the biggest.
I think Mike knows he looks like shit, and I think he blames a lot of things on genetics because of that.
Influence on injury risk of all the things.
And I also think he gets injured a lot, and he has a lot of like nagging pain that he doesn't understand why someone like him would have that if he's so knowledgeable. So he blames genetics.
But I would say that technique, in my view, has at least 3, possibly 4 ways it could influence injury risk.
God, it just over-explains so much shit, right?
So I think it's fairly well understood, or at least we have reason to believe, that changes in movement pattern from repetition to repetition, essentially moving in ways you're not accustomed to with high loads, can increase the chance of injury. So if you're used to doing the same movement, even as Jordan
and like Ray would point out, I've definitely heard Jordan point this out, like, even if your deadlift looks like shit, if it looks like the same piece of shit every single time, we're not so as worried about you getting hurt.
Fucking ridiculous. You know, because as soon as you use shitty form, it's not like something bad happens right then. It's a buildup. It's repeated stress to the same structures that are kind of taking too much of the load. So if you have a shitty deadlift and it looks like shit, it's a problem no matter if you haven't gotten yourself hurt yet. It's just a matter of time.
Because you're used to those movement patterns, you've had some adaptive buildup in them, so think you're fine. I think there is slight reason to think injury risk could be magnified if every repetition looks very, very different, right? So if you're doing you've seen someone do like an underhand bent over.
I can tell you, I'd rather have someone who has like a shitty deadlift have, 3 shitty deadlifts and 3 good deadlifts than just 6 shitty ones. So I don't really agree with that either. See, Mike just places way too much emphasis on programming and not enough on biomechanics. Honestly, in my opinion, give me somebody who's got really great, really perfect biomechanics and just very average programming. I'll take that any day of the week over somebody who's got really great, really perfect programming and just average biomechanics, okay? Assuming the intensity is the same, the person with the superb biomechanics is gonna get way more out of every single rep that they do. They're gonna get way more time under tension, they're gonna get way better muscle recruitment. All right, so I've kind of shown you that you can't really use Mike's education as a justification for his shitty advice. You might be thinking though, what about Jared Feather? He looks amazing. And they use the same techniques, they're like partners, they work out together all the time. And I wondered this myself, so I had a feeling that if I really looked at Jared's training, he probably didn't work out the exact same way that Mike did. And sure enough, when I look at him, I see way less orientation strategies. I see an actual connection to muscle. And that's why he looks the way he looks and Mike looks the way he looks. Yeah, there's a genetic component to it, but there's definitely a training style to it. You watch Jared work out, he works out like a bodybuilder. You watch Mike work out, he works out like a powerlifter. So let's break down some of this. I'll show you what I'm talking about. When Jared goes, you can see he's got a little bit of a forward elbow position. His arms are kind of in front of him. He's getting some lats. Yeah, he's getting a little too much extension in his spine for my liking, but it's not a big deal at all. And it just looks like he's getting a lot more control, a lot more time under tension under actual muscles. Now let's compare that to how Mike looks. And I'll show you the biggest differences.
A lot harder at 60.
All right, we see Mike go. Doesn't that look a little different? First of all, we're using some orientation, some movement to try to jerk our way up there. We look at the elbows, they're really flared out instead of being turned in. That means we're not getting any lats. I mean, really, he doesn't have that range of motion for that degree of shoulder flexion at this moment. He's orienting to get there. So he actually shouldn't even be doing these pull-ups. He's getting 0 lats. I mean, that's a big difference.
And 4 sets of pull-ups done. Assisted pull-up time, we'll do another 4
Assisted
sets.
pull-ups, you can see the same thing. Overextending his back. He's basically turned this into like a high row of some kind.
You know what I feel that, fellas?
Not your lats.
In my testicles. Fuck.
Then when you watch Jared go, again, you see a lot more forward position, a lot more shoulder extension. He's getting some lats engaged. And he's not nearly as oriented as Mike is. Okay, here we have Dr. Mike critiquing a girl's lifting technique.
He's looking directly down into the ground, and she's rounding her upper back.
I mean, you don't want to look directly down into the ground necessarily, but you want your head neutral. You don't want to be looking directly up the way you promote on everything.
Her back. What I would like to see is her arch her upper back.
Oh, surprise, surprise.
That helps you arch the lower.
So we can see here we have Jared Feather on Dr. Mike's IG, and you can tell he's being coached through this. He's got crazy neck extension, really big hyper extensions through the back. Really, this is Dr. Mike technique.
Looking forward, it helps you do that. It helps you push your hips back more naturally. It's an auto.
Look at that big arch.
It also can help you detect if your knees are too far forward and help you push your knees back. That upright posture is not the way to lift the most weight, but the mind-muscle connection you can generate with your hamstrings and the specific technique.
I would never listen to Mike about anything about mind muscle connection.
To make sure hamstrings the limiting factor will occur better for most people if they arch their entire back and lift their chest up. I see a lot of people doing this look down stuff. I don't really know where they got it.
It's because they know that there's value to keeping a stack. They're going to feel more activation in their glutes whenever they keep their ribs in a neutral position.
Got it from, but this is not the ideal technique for this exercise.
I just can't stand the condescending look on his face, you know. Ugh. Okay, so that was Jared Feather on Dr. Mike's Instagram. Let's look at Jared Feather on his own Instagram doing the same exact exercise. Oh, look, a lot different looking. In fact, he's almost looking at the ground the same exact way the girl was that Mike was critiquing. We don't see this crazy hyperextension. We don't see the neck super extended. This looks a lot better, and it's because Jared intuitively knows that when you keep a neutral spine, you're going to put more tension on the muscles. He can connect his muscles in a way that Dr. Mike obviously cannot. Yeah, I mean, this is way better form. I would be totally happy with this if I saw one of my clients doing that. Here we see some more chest work, and this just emphasizes again, we've already kind of established that Dr. Mike has no connection to his chest. There's no contraction going on there. That is just super flared ribs and just pressing with the retracted shoulder blades. I'm not seeing any protraction really occur at all. But when we see Jared go, again, we can see protraction, we can see the ribs coming down a little bit, we can see actual activation in the pecs. So this is why the physiques don't look the same, even though they do similar movements and have similar programming. Good mornings. Well, just one more example so we can see Dr. Mike hitting this crazy super big extension, just really kind of arching the back, sticking that ass out there. Just putting as much on that low back as possible. And then we see Jared, very neutral spine, much different, a very appropriate amount of extension in the back, putting a lot more on the hamstrings and glutes. I don't recommend going into such extreme extension right away, but when you go heavy, your back's gonna go into extension, your spine's gonna go into extension. It's not that that in itself is terrible, but it's when that is the only thing you can do and you have no other options. That's when you start to get issues. And shoulder flies, again, on him, I don't see the crazy ribs just flying up right away, so that's why Jared's got cap delts and Mike does not. So I know I seem like I'm kind of hating on Dr. Mike, and a little bit I am, but just keep this in mind whenever you're watching his stuff, okay? Yeah, he might be okay to listen to on some things, but do not listen to a single word he has to say when it comes to workout technique, form, biomechanics, anything like that, okay? So let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you have any comments or questions or disagreements or anything at all below. All right, thanks.